The race for AG is heating up. Who's in, who's out, and who's eyeing the seat. And new voter registration numbers show that Democrats have registered 30,000 more voters than Republicans. Is Florida's political landscape changing? All this and more on today's episode of Power Play with our guests, Dave Royce, editor of the News Service of Florida, and Joe Follick, reporter with the New York Times Florida newspapers. Dave, let's get started. The race for Attorney General. We have Senator Dave Ehrenberg interested in the race, possibly Senator Gelber, and I believe that Rod Smith may be eyeing that same seat.
Rod Smith, those are all three on the Democratic side. Senator Ehrenberg just got into the race. Gelber and Smith were looking at it, and there was this sort of waiting period where everybody was waiting and maybe talking about who was going to run, and Ehrenberg maybe jumped the gun a little yesterday and got in the race.
Joe, what do you think?
Well, I don't think we're going to have three candidates in the Democrat primary come next year. I think you're going to have a couple months here where Rod Smith is either going to make up his mind or not. I'm not so sure his heart's in the race. He would have been doing it by now, and I think we'll winnow this down to one candidate by the time.
And we don't have a candidate on the Republican side yet.
Which is something I was just going to come to. But let's talk about any tension maybe between Senator Ehrenberg, Senator Gelber.
Well, Ehrenberg sent signals for years. I mean, that this is what he wants to do. He worked in that office before, of course, and I think Gelber really wanted to run for the United States Senate. And so he's kind of a whole new thing in that equation anyway. One of the things that's interesting to me to watch about this whole AG's race is, and the elections on several elections this year, is this whole decision about whether or not to even have a primary, whether or not the voters in your party should decide a candidate, or sort of this leadership model where, leaders in the party or maybe the candidates themselves decide. I don't know what the best way to do it is, but it's interesting to watch that going on this year.
Let's talk about the Republican candidates, if any.
Well, I guess it looks like it's either Jeff Kottkamp or Bill Galvano. Jeff Kottkamp, at least right now, has the image of a wounded guy with a lot of the negative publicity about his flying around, and not a whole lot of positive publicity for anything else during his first 3 years up here. Galvano, great guy, well respected up here in this 4-block area. Who knows how he runs statewide, though.
Let's moving on. Voter registration. It looks like the Democrats, beating the Republicans, 30,000 more voters. What do you make of that?
Well, a lot of that is the afterglow of President Obama. That's what the governor said yesterday, and I think he's right. And a lot of that registration happened right after the election last year, and so it may be a little skewed in that sense. But Democrats have always held a registration advantage in this state, and it looks like that's going to continue. One of the things that was interesting about that was the ethnic breakdown of the registrations. New voters, Hispanics are registering with the Democratic Party in far larger numbers than with the Republicans.
Do you think we're going to see a shift or a change in the political landscape? I mean, Republicans tend to draw the Hispanic voters. Do you think that we may be...
Well, we'll see. I mean, I don't put a whole lot of stock in the voter registration numbers. It always comes down to turnout and where your boundaries are for the legislative races. As far as the Hispanic voters, I think a lot of conservatives are very excited about this as well. They see these, immigrants coming in who have very strong faith values and share the kind of similar values that Christian Coalition and social conservatives feel as well. So we'll see I think it's a little early to say where these guys are going to go.
Dave, what else? Anything to add to that, or?
I think Joe's right that ultimately the redistricting in terms of the legislative races, I mean, that's what matters. It matters who draws the districts and how they draw them. At the statewide level, I'm not sure. I think it's a little too early to say that this is a huge deal yet.
Well, gentlemen, let's move on to the power play of the week.
It's Dave Ehrenberg. Dave Ehrenberg jumping into the Attorney General's race ahead while everybody else is saying, well, we got to talk about this and figure out who's gonna run. Ehrenberg just says, well, I'll go.
What do you think, Joe?
My power play of the week is, I think it was this last time, which says something. It's big business again. They managed to get through a growth management bill that the developers wanted that really didn't have a whole lot of legs 3 or 4 months ago. They got through a workers' comp bill that they wanted very desperately, and the unemployment extension bill was not as onerous. Yes, it's a tax increase, but it was far less than what they had feared at the beginning.
Well, gentlemen, thanks for joining us, and to you, our viewers, thanks for joining us on Power Play. For the latest on all your political news, please visit SafetyReview.com.